There's at least 10,000 tools, software, whatever you want to call it, platforms out there in the marketing technology space. And I've been doing a few speaking engagements around the country on MarTech and AI from the perspective of, well, where do you start? How do you know what to use? And you do have to narrow the focus down for us because we consider ourselves a growth marketing agency. We're using tools and platforms that amplify growth and automate. But right now, anybody that's in marketing needs to be following along with the Chat GPT and all the different outputs that Chat GPT provides and experimenting with it. What's coming out of Chat GPT is also affecting the search engines. And so everything that we do from a marketing standpoint, putting up a website, adding content to a site, having content plans, writing social media posts, doing any ads, all of this is being impacted by ChatGPT.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Valerie Jennings. Valerie is the CEO of Jennings Social Media and MarTech, which she founded in 2003 and has grown into a highly competitive MarTech agency. The agency specializes in paid media, SEO, content strategy, and influencer marketing, working with clients in the automotive industry, transportation logistics, healthcare, beauty, financial services, travel and tourism, technology, home services, and more. She remains a leader in the industry and is involved in the community, speaking at conferences, moderating and participating in digital panels, and speaking to community groups. You can learn more about Valerie at jsmmtech.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Valerie.
Val, welcome to the Corporate Couch.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice seeing you. And I'm sure we're going to dig more into your career, but I want to congratulate you and your company for celebrating this month the 20th year anniversary of Jennings Social Media. So that's phenomenal. Great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's start with a fun question. We've been in the pandemic 3+ years now, and we're recording here in June of 2023. What is the craziest attire you've seen on a Zoom call, or lack of attire?
I haven't had the pleasure of experiencing any awkward Zoom meetings, so I'm sorry to disappoint everybody. I'm sure there was plenty of shenanigans, and I'm okay not knowing about them. But
that's funny. Yeah, I think I told you offline that there was one guest I had. And he said, "Yeah, there was this guy that showed up in just his underwear." And I go, "Who was that?" And he goes, "Oh, it was me, actually." So,
he wanted everyone to know.
I guess. I mean, yeah. So that guess has not actually been published yet, but I hopefully he won't get mad. So yeah. So I wanted to. You grew up in Iowa, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And growing up, what were some things you loved to do as a kid?
Oh, I grew up on the lake out in the country. And so in the summers, we used to go canoeing. My sister and I would just take the canoe out during the day and, go over to the rocks and spend the day swimming. And sometimes we'd go fishing. But that lake was kind of our oasis in the summer months. And we really enjoyed that natural freedom. It's something that, I'm sad Alexa doesn't have that same experience, but I really, as an adult, really appreciate it now. As a kid, it kind of felt a little lonely, right? Because we're way out there. But, as an adult, you kind of miss some of that natural beauty and tranquility when we get busy with life. So, but yeah, just it was very wholesome, growing up that way.
Very nice. And just to be clear, Alexa is your daughter, correct?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, she's my daughter, and
I just didn't want people
she'll
to
be
think you were
turning
talking
10
about. Yeah,
in July.
I just didn't want people to think you're
The
talking about
computer
Alexa
or
from Amazon.
the smart device. Yes, you're right. I have adopted an Alexa Amazon.
So do you have any aspirations as a kid of like, oh, when I'm an adult, I want to be this? What was it for you?
Um, no, I did not have any aspirations when I was a child. I was always very busy. Dance, music, art, friends, cheerleading. I did all the normal kid things. But I grew up in a family business, and my dad would take us out on the job sites when we were like 11, 12 years old. And it was just a normal thing in our house that everybody was a little involved with the business. And so looking back, that was my normal, and I think that maybe that predisposed me as I got into college to just think, well, having a business, your own business, would be a natural progression. And it wasn't a scary thought to start something that was your own, just because that's what we were conditioned to believe. So, yeah, I can't say that I was one of those intense kids that was daydreaming about taking over the world and starting a company. It was just something that happened later on in life for me, but definitely earlier than most people, because I started the business when I was 24, which, now isn't too abnormal to hear younger people starting companies, but I think 20 years ago it was not as common as it is today. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the backstory on that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely talk about your business and how you started. But so you go to University of Northern Iowa, right? So you stay in the
Yeah.
state, okay? And then why pick
Yes.
political communication journalism major? What was the thought process behind that at 18, 19 years old?
Um, well, civics, history, those were always my favorite subjects in high school. I just loved learning about the history of our country, how things worked, how things got decided. I also really liked geopolitics and the international relations. So that just made sense to start with political communication. And later on, I picked up the double minor in journalism and international affairs, and journalism more out of necessity. I realized that, hey, if you're going to be good at anything, any job, you have to be able to write and communicate, express yourself, try to be as objective as possible, and how we're framing up our thoughts, our articles, our PR, whatever. I worked in DC did a couple of internships. And my first internship was with the federal courts and their public affairs department. And that's when I really became aware of how important the journalism background was, and being able to write and communicate and get the message out to the media. Again, this is over 20 years ago. So working with the press was a lot more critical. And it was kind of the only means we had to tell stories. But I loved learning about the judicial system, our federal courts, the judges, the inner workings of the press, the court system, the public, and how things were perceived. And so I ended up staying on there through the summer. They hired me to work there as an employee, and I wrote for some of the newsletters and had the opportunity to interview a lot of the directors that worked and ran, the judicial branch. So it was fascinating. And I came back to school really inspired, picked up a journalism minor, and I believe I had already added the international affairs minor. And so it was really exciting. It was an exciting time. And I had, even though UNI is a smaller school, I had excellent professors. I remember my journalism professor, Nelia Dimitrova. I would go to her house on the weekends, and she got me writing for the local newspaper and doing TV production, things that I really wasn't thinking about, but was open to getting outside of my comfort zone and just putting myself in places and positions that I thought would help me. When you're that young, you can't always see the big picture. You don't know what your career is necessarily going to look like. And I kept going, wow, I'm accumulating all these skills and all these new opportunities. I don't really know where it's going to go, but I loved it, like all of it, even the uncomfortable stuff, even going on camera in college and co-producing a local TV show, like that's uncomfortable unless you've been doing that as a kid. So it put me in a position to get jobs that my peers weren't able to get, because I had this wide variety of working with the press, communication, research, analysis, debating facts, producing shows, and putting together concepts. And I just go back to, I enjoyed it. And I think that passion just gets lost as we get older. We think about our mortgage, our kids, paying for college, and sometimes we have to compromise, and that's life. But things seem to work out better in the end when we're doing things we love. And that's what I have tried to stay focused on during this career journey is, do I love what I'm doing? And if I don't love it, why? And maybe it's better somebody else do that part of the work, or maybe it's just not for me. But when you're doing those long hours and making those tough decisions about what to do with your life, that's my biggest takeaway is we have to love what we do. And if that is enough to nurture our spirit, then that's enough. And, some people are blessed to also find purpose in what they do. And that's beautiful too, And if you get all of that in your life, well, you've accomplished a lot.
Yeah, 100%. So was that your biggest learning in college? Just, when you're passionate about something and like what you do? I mean, 'cause
Yeah.
that's pretty mature for a 21, 22-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I loved being uncomfortable. I was okay being bad at something and taking that as a challenge. And the reward was when I was able to achieve it. And that kept me moving, because that's progress. I'm a very progress-oriented, data-driven person. And I love the arts, like even as a kid. And so I felt like I was doing the right thing, what was nurturing my career, my passion. And I was also comfortable not having all the answers, but I had great mentors that I trusted and consulted with weekly. That grounded me in this, going through college, you're immature, you don't necessarily know what you want or what the right things are to do. But if you can surround yourself with wise people that are worldly, and all of the mentors I worked with in college were international. They came here from other countries. Their perspective was more about global competition, not about competition that was going on in our backyard, which I think also we get lost in. You know, sometimes where we live isn't reality. And it's important that all of us have a deep appreciation for the global competitive economy and how we stack up on a global scale. And I just feel like our world is so much smaller than it's ever been, right?
Yeah.
So these skills and learnings early on and developing, cultivating emotional intelligence is really important.
So, Val, I don't know what your GPA was or what your high school GPA was, but I'm going to guess you were a pretty good student. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
that's
Well,
true.
that would have been my guess. So I think it's fascinating that and I would say, I was a very good student also, but I think when you're a good student and you're successful at things, it's that Carol Dweck book, growth mindset. You don't have a growth mindset because you fear failure. So where did you get that drive to learn and be okay with failure?
That that's a really interesting question, very deep. Um, I was stubborn. I think is the best way to describe it. I've always been a little stubborn. And that stubbornness is internal. It's that I like a challenge. I like to be challenged. And that is my measuring stick of if I'm progressing or not. If I don't feel challenged, I get pretty bored and kind of check out. And I've always been that way. Like I have a busy mind, and if I can focus and concentrate on something like art or a creative task or designing or creating a company, it keeps my mind busy and it keeps it engaged. So I don't know, Chap, if I can answer that. I think it's a combo of personality and the way my brain is wired. I think some people's brains are just wired differently and they have that drive and curiosity. And I think that's often why we'll see two kids in the same family, and one kid is an overachiever and another one is very content, with life. So it's just our makeup. Some of it could be environmental. I was always encouraged by my mom, my grandparents to keep going, that there was always a high standard and benchmark to achieve things. But I also, for people maybe that aren't wired that way, I feel like this is a skill you can teach your brain. There are exercises that we can do to keep our brain engaged and active and focused and progress driven. And so even for people that want, to be that way, right? I think it is attainable. There's so much we don't know about the human brain that, still to this day, but I don't know. That is my roundabout answer of telling you I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but that's all I've ever known.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just your early experiences. You were a news anchor. Um,
Mhm.
And you talked about your working for the paper. It was the Waterloo Cedar Falls
Your
newspaper,
post,
right? The
yeah,
Courier. Okay, there we go.
yeah.
That's my
Well, and all.
in-depth research staff that came up with that one. What was the greatest article
Well,
you wrote for them?
I actually wrote about Russia and US relations. I wrote about a lot of just political articles that were all international affairs driven. My journalism professor, and I wish I remembered the title of the article, that she took one of my articles and submitted it for an award and it won. It ended up placing. She totally did it behind my back, but I was happy that she did do it. And that opportunity originated from her good counsel. She said, "You have to be published before you graduate college." And again, I'm like, wow, those are really high expectations.
Yeah, wow.
But, she came from a different world and she was very global in her perspectives. And I said, okay, well, how do I do that? And she goes, you need to go over to the editor's office at the newspaper and tell him that you want to write for his paper. And I said, "You want me to march into an editor's office and demand employment?" And she said, "Yeah, I do. And I challenge you to do it."
Wow,
And I
that's
did it.
wonderful. I
And he
mean, it
said,
really is.
yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. So you do have to have some moxie to do some of this stuff, but if somebody tells you this is the standard, it's acceptable. I get, again, the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody says no. But when they say yes, they just opened up, 100 doors for you that didn't exist before. And that's what this life is about. That's what this country has been founded on. And the entrepreneurial spirit is about taking risk. And, if it works out, great. Maybe your dream comes true. If it doesn't, you try again and try again. So it's that persistence and perseverance that we've all been told is the American dream, that it's still alive. It might be a little more difficult today, but it's still there. It still exists. But teaching kids to do that and encouraging them to do it, even if they fail on their first attempt, sometimes it's just jumping in and doing it that matters most. And they break through that ceiling. And then everything after that is just another step to the final goal. So I don't know. That's kind of how I look at those things. And even how we can maybe cultivate that with young kids, even, not even college, but in young children.
Right. Oh, absolutely. So, so when you graduate, what was your first kind of official professional job out of college?
Well, I was already working at the Cedar Falls TV studio covering city government.
Okay.
I had that put in place before I graduated college, but I hadn't been there, I think, even a couple of months. And one of the local state senators called me and said, "Oh, I watch your updates on on the local cable, and I would love for you to go to the state capitol and be my legislative assistant."
Wow.
And I was very excited about it. Those positions are seasonal, but again, I thought, well, this is another opportunity to develop some of the political communication skills that I've been wanting to uncover. And it's focused quite a bit on the journalism side of things. And so I went there and I had experience. And from there, took a position in Minnesota where I was a little bit more on fronts with the media. And all of this is leapfrogging, right? And being okay with not knowing where the end path leads at that time. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Now you're like two jobs in post college. So since you started the company 20
Yeah.
years ago, I mean, now you're pretty close to starting the company, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah. Pretty
Okay.
close. I stayed in Minnesota. I did statewide and federal political campaigns and did all of the public relations, grassroots communication, worked in the war rooms, worked with donors and events. And I learned these skills in grassroots mobilization, which in my eyes, this type of grassroots outreach was this kind of the foundation of social media, where you get niche communities swarming to a community to share things that they bring them together, commonalities. And it really, all the social media stuff started at a grassroots level. I mean, if you look at this Facebook, how that began is very much grassroots. So I got this grassroots experience really early on, and I was fascinated about it. I also started developing a little bit of discouragement with the overlappings of politicians and the media and how easily manipulated the press was. And I started seeing that really early on in my career in my early 20s. And I started feeling a little jaded about, wow, this stuff really isn't neutral or objective. Like all these press releases, press events really does spin the cycle of news. And I kind of just started getting a little bit of a sour attitude about the media at that stage. And so once the campaign cycle was over, I went to the legislature in Minnesota and did all of the spinning with the press and more legislative affairs stuff. And I had my fill of it, or, it was almost too easy and ridiculous. And yeah, so I am not really surprised by the state of affairs that we have today and how people feel about fake news and all that stuff. But yeah, I started my business shortly after that and started in Overland Park, and with my skills working in Vermont and with politicians, I actually worked on, I want to say it was about 20 political races in 2003, 04, maybe 05 here, and did all of these same things and enjoyed it and was very grateful for the opportunity to have the trust of elected officials and local leaders. I hadn't been living here that long. I was only 24 and felt like I had so much respect and trust from people that didn't really know me. I worked my tail off. I worked 7 days a week around the clock. Campaigns are really tireless, thankless jobs, and did it and was grateful for it. Didn't complain and realized that, hey, this is seasonal work and I need to figure out a way to make this residual. And that's when I started breaking off and working with corporations and applying the tactics and skills of PR and journalism and pitching people for stories to the private sector. And again, like, it's seizing opportunities. It's looking at ways to optimize your business and making it stable. So I started transitioning about a year into the business, into the private sector. And, we don't do any political work. We haven't done any political work, since those early days. And I prefer to just be neutral, and I enjoy working with business leaders, business owners, up and coming executives, and people all across the board. And I'm very grateful for all of the companies that we have made a contribution in building. So back to this PR thing, we started using social media in 2005. So again, very early to the table with innovation and testing. not being afraid of what we don't know about it, what it's going to do, just monitoring it and capturing data and maintaining some sort of hybrid approach to helping our using, the traditional media along with the social media in 2005.
So Val, it's so fascinating to me. So, but you're 24 years old, and
Yeah.
again, I think we talked about it offline. Like, today it's not totally unusual to start a company at 24. I just
No.
interviewed Cody Isabel, or published his podcast, just came out, episode 30. And, he started a company at about 24, 25. He's 27 now. But, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me. Like, you're talking, early 2000s, you're 24, and, wherever you want to say, female. And it just, what like drove you to say, okay, and I know the family business, which I'm curious what the family business was, but I mean, and so you model yourself after your family, and that's usual for you. But like, go through your thought process at 24 and say, I'm going to start this company.
So when I was in DC and working at the public affairs department for the federal courts, that's when I noticed, oh, wow, this is really cool. They have an editor, a TV department, a research department, events, like they have media relations. They're doing all these things. And I really loved it. I was like, this is very cool. And I started thinking about my experiences in TV and with PR and all the stuff that I was learning. And I actually started visualizing what that might look like if I started something like that in my mind. I hadn't even graduated college yet. And I was thinking that would be really cool. Like, I mean, wow, you get all those different mediums, all those different types of content and stories. And I don't know, again, it just sparked an interest and thought it was really fascinating and thought, wow, I might want to do that someday. So I already kind of had the thoughts in my mind and thought, well, okay, I'll just finish, what I'm working on here. And so when I did move to Overland Park, I was obviously in between jobs and said, well, I'll just go ahead and see if I can get some consulting work. And that's what I did. And that's kind of how this business started. It wasn't something where I sat down and went, today I'm going to create a full agency. It was more, oh, I'm in between jobs. Okay, this sounds like a good idea. I am going to put my name out there and see what I can do. And again, like, I just go back to, if you love what you do, if you're grateful for your opportunities and you're in the right time at the right place and you're a hard worker and you're good to people, then that is all going to manifest in something better and better and better. And it hasn't always been easy. It's not easy. It's still not easy. But if you love what you do, you can overcome that stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess those thoughts were there and the passion was there. And who knows, maybe I was just also a little naive, right? I wasn't totally jaded by obstacles of life and still had this very naive innocence about how you accomplish things. And I'd always had support to do mentors as far as support goes. I never got any financial support, but I had really great mentors and that encouragement to keep going. As far as the family business goes, my dad still has a commercial painting business, and his dad had a commercial painting business, and my great-grandfather ran butcher shops in London, and who knows how many more entrepreneurs there are on that side of the family. So,
Wow.
sometimes they say this stuff is genetic,
Yeah,
it's just in the
in your
blood.
DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that stuff is passed down and it becomes normal. That's just normal for some families to do that.
Yeah. So you've mentioned mentors several times, and I was going to
Yeah.
ask you. So yeah, I think it's very key. Mentors are good at
Yeah.
any age, but especially when you're a
Yeah.
24-year-old entrepreneur in the early
Yeah.
2000s, female entrepreneur. Who were your mentors, and what were the biggest learnings from them?
Well, they definitely changed over time. My my journalism professor, she still calls and checks in, and she's actually had me speak to her students over the years and give advice, and I've done
Nice.
so happily. And so she's kind of been consistent, but they have been people I've met in business, some longer than others, and some, it just kind of a natural evolution of a mentorship relationship that develops, and in all different types of industries. It's interesting. Almost all of my mentors, except for probably my journalism professor, have been men. And I have appreciated their perspective. Not that, there weren't women out there that couldn't give a good perspective, but a lot of the women I felt like were great supporters and cheerleaders and champions. But men really stood up and helped me. They gave great advice. They gave it from their perspective. I don't feel like I got different advice because I was a woman. Nobody ever said to me, oh, because you're a woman, you need to do it this way.
Hmm.
And I had a very positive experience. I mean, some women talk about, oh, women just need to stick with women. And I am a huge advocate for women, huge. But when it came to the mentoring, I liked this more, I wouldn't say more aggressive. I would say just different style, more direct, more analytical, more honest and candid. And, I'm a data scientist along with being a creative person. And so that worked well for me. I didn't feel like I was being talked down to. I felt like I was being challenged to think about things from a different perspective that was more analytical. And women do that too and do it well. But I was more comfortable with this style. So I don't know. I think it's different for everyone, but
Sure.
that's kind of, and a lot of the mentors I had were in tech, software, finance. So again, very data techie industries were some of the mentors that I worked with.
Now, so it's interesting, communication, journalism, PR. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then you get kind of this data analytical
Yep.
bent to you. Is that did you grow up really good at math, or just that just became a passion the more you talk to these mentors that were in the tech space?
I was not great at math. In fact, the only B I got in college was in math.
Oh boy.
So I wasn't terrible at it, but I didn't, I wasn't acing math, but I did well in my like data science classes and looking at patterns and trends.
Hmm.
That stuff is easy for me. And I think I've gotten more comfortable as I've worked in the business because all the business decisions are based on data and margins and metrics. And that's what social media brought to the table. So whereas PR was just, oh, that's a fluffy thing and we got you this press coverage, clients actually started pushing back and saying, oh, this is great. Like, I'm on the cover or I have a full feature. That's fantastic. But what does that mean? What does that translate into? And again, me, I'm like, oh, this is a challenge. Like, oh, how do I figure this out? And then social media started surfacing, and it was all web traffic, search placement, impressions and clicks. And uh, it was almost like, getting Christmas early. You're like, wow, okay, I can quantify everything I do and share it with the clients. Look, all these numbers, and you got all this traffic, and then that converted to this. And so my brain was happy. It made it happy. It was like, oh, all this creative work we do, now we can justify it. And it's the perfect marriage for creative people. And a few years ago, it would have been probably right before the pandemic. I actually got a certification in the intro to AI and loved it. Like, again, just ate it up. This is fascinating. Wow, we're going to wire the world differently. And there's big challenges and ethics issues on the horizon, but this is fascinating. And so I think it all amplifies what we do on the creative side. And it also makes good business sense. And when things just are practical, it helps businesses thrive. And I recognize not everybody has those skills, but I, would hope that anybody that starts a business has somebody really good with, the finance or with data and patterns and doing those types of analysis. For us, we just have to do it. And the job of the marketer has become more of a hybrid role using creativity and technology, which includes reading reports and running reports. Thankfully, as marketers, we have a lot of AI tools at our disposal to help us build those reports faster. And we don't have to sit there and crunch numbers, but we do have to be able to look at trends, patterns, and do analysis on it. So I think, again, all of this is the byproduct of having a business, thriving in the business, and looking for ways to optimize it and ultimately make the clients more successful.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating time for sure. How AI and Martech are going to change the landscape of marketing going forward.
Yeah.
So I did see on your LinkedIn you took that Coursera course on AI.
Yeah.
And so, what recommendations do you have, Val? For your chief marketing officer or just anybody that
Yeah.
wants to get like some ground level conceptual information on AI. What recommendations do you have in terms of learning that?
It is a vast industry, and in as far as marketing goes, I mean, here's the scary part. There's 10,000, at least 10,000 tools, software, whatever you want to call it, platforms out there in the marketing technology space. And I've been doing a few speaking engagements around the country on MarTech and AI from, the perspective of, well, where do you start? How do you know what to use? And you do have to narrow the focus down for us because we consider ourselves a growth marketing agency. We're using tools and platforms that amplify growth and automate like workflows or reports. But right now, anybody that's in marketing needs to be following along with the Chat GPT and all the different outputs that Chat GPT provides and experimenting with it. All of what's coming out of Chat GPT is also affecting the search engines. And so everything that we do from a marketing standpoint, putting up a website, adding content to a site, having content plans, writing social media posts, doing any ads, all of this is being impacted by ChatGPT and other generative AI platforms that are out there. And so all of the marketing publishers are talking about this. Google also has its own resource area, but what I'm doing, I really like Neil Patel. I like how he breaks down complex algorithms, trends, AI stuff, and makes it user friendly, makes it applicable, gives people some steps and tips to start with. So again, like everybody has a different style and they're at a different stage, but I think Neil Patel is a really great resource. He sends out a regular little e-blast. It's just very short and sweet with a link to a blog and a video. And he's very on top of these things. But again, you can kind of get these resources anywhere, but I would focus on ChatGPT and the Google SEO changes that are in place. And then, just kind of let it evolve. Everybody's needs are different. And that's kind of what I say in this talk I give is it depends on your marketing team or your agency. Are you needing to automate and consolidate? Are you needing tools to scale sales and marketing? Are you looking for ways to create MarTech stacks? Like it's like it is no one size fits all. And nobody is going to be able to master 10,000 plus programs out there. So, but the basics are, and the disruption is coming from the AI with the ChatGPT and just the Google algorithm changes and a few other things that are going on. So it's a lot.
Yeah,
But,
no, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. Would love to hear that talk sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, 2 decades of running a company in a very fast evolving space, right? Technology and but so how have you evolved from, when you started 20 years ago to today in terms of your company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that um, reinventing a business many times is essential and an essential skill and something that all entrepreneurs need to be comfortable with. And we all of us have read stories about these big corporations that have been hugely successful and then like almost overnight they're out of business because they didn't evolve or adopt new technologies or were maybe in some cases too big to change. That's also a scary thought. So being agile and always kind of having one or two people, or if your group is bigger and you're fortunate to dedicate more people to research and development and testing things, I think is so important. I feel like not only spotting trends, but also doing early testing is key to survival in any industry this day and age. But back to your question, I mean, the business is, oh man, it's night and day. Like when I started, it was grassroots political PR. And then a couple of years into it, we were starting to work with private companies and then exited out of the political. And then 2005 started integrating social media. And we were doing influencer research assessments for publicly traded companies. Probably in 2006, 2007, we worked with a big consumer research group out of New York City. We were like their guinea pigs. I mean, they even had us take profile tests on like how did we work as a human? Why were we so early in the social media? And then they had us running pilot programs for their consumer research marketing, which was so interesting. And we were analyzing influencers that may or may not have been, influencing the ethanol industry and what they were saying about it. I mean, all this stuff was very, very cool, very early on. And there was a lot of fast growth. I remember I was pretty overwhelmed and stressed out. I didn't get a normal lifestyle for my peers. When I was in my 20s, I was, sitting at my desk until probably 8 o'clock at night on Fridays and working through the weekends a lot of times too. And that was, that's just part of the deal. But I started, talking about social media marketing, and it was more than just social media. It was social media marketing, because we were sending traffic to websites and studying the trends and analytics, conversions. And so the business changed and moved out of this kind of PR-ish focus completely. Oh, I don't know. It was probably 2007, 8-ish, because we had been already working in social media since 2005. And I rebranded the company, Jennings Social Media Marketing, again, really early on. And now, it was probably during the pandemic, I changed it to Jennings Social Media and MarTech, because we are so focused on marketing technology and AI programs, and have a hybrid approach to the work that we do. But, right now it is a full service social media marketing and digital advertising agency. And everything under that umbrella includes like websites and influencer marketing, paid media, social media and content creation, SEO, creative services, and MarTech consulting.
Wow.
So it is hugely different than where we started.
So you go back in time when you started, and obviously you make sacrifices, but your peers are out at happy hour on a Friday night and you're
Right.
working till 8 o'clock. But is there anything you would have done differently when you started the company and let's say the first, 4 or 5 years, knowing what you know now?
Yeah. So when I started, I was very consumed by, oh, am I going to be able to make enough money to pay myself and live? And I think that's normal. I mean, every year that I've had the business, we have always been in the positive. We've never had a year that we were in the red. And in fact, we've had huge growth. Again, in the last couple of years here, like massive growth. But I wish I would have found someone that could have mentored me more on balance sheets, profit margins, projecting cash flow. I didn't know anything about that stuff. I didn't take any business classes. And again, math wasn't my strong suit, so I didn't gravitate towards that stuff. And really, I didn't even know about it. I didn't know what that story, I didn't even have those words in my vocabulary at that point. I did hire a CPA, and that was just to make sure everything was on the up and up and we were following all the tax rules. But I really needed a finance person that could have helped me with those things, because they're two totally different roles. A CPA doesn't typically do that. So you need a person that's really good on the finance side. And I think as the business has matured, we spend a lot more time on those topics. And I expect that, in time, somebody would figure this out. But if you don't know about it and you're starting a business, this person, whether they're a part-time, a contractor, a consultant, oh my gosh, if I would have had that, we would have probably done so much better, because I would have been focused on a different model, like maybe a different financial model, or how I sold services or packaged them, or, how we paid people, or how that was going to scale. Like I was just guessing. So that, I think, well, I would have done that differently. And I wouldn't say it was a setback, but it certainly slowed growth
Sure.
down. And so for people that don't have that background, or maybe it intimidates them, find somebody and pay that person, because they're going to help you grow your business, and you're going to find out really quickly if you have a viable business. They're going to be giving you metrics and numbers that show you how well you're doing, what your margins are, which clients are profitable, which ones aren't, where did you undersell or maybe not staff correctly. That stuff, like, that's what really makes a business strong. And when a business is healthy, it's because that side of the business is very stable, set, and well taken care of.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great advice. I love Seth Godin. He says no one. We talk about elevator pitches, but he says no one's ever sold anything in an elevator. But if you're riding in the elevator with somebody and you had to explain Jennings, social media, and Martech their superpower, what's that elevator? What do you say to that person in the elevator?
Well, I always explain that it's a social media marketing and digital advertising agency, but I qualify it with, we are a growth marketing agency. No two agencies are alike. Mm-hmm. Our focus is on growing our clients' businesses and brands. And it starts with what those goals are. And if it's to generate more website leads, then we're going to build marketing programs and ads programs to do that. If it's to build the brand, then we're going to focus on maybe influencers and something else. But I always qualify that, because I feel like this industry is very crowded and people do not realize that those agencies have, nuances to them. And that's our niche. And we're proud of that, and we love what we do, and people respect it and they get it. And then when they talk to another agency that comes at them a different way, they go, wow, I had no idea, there were night and day differences. So that's really my elevator pitch is, what we are, and then the qualification in the industry and how long we've been in business. And I kind of leave it at that.
Well, Val, you've had a great, fascinating career. You've won Female Entrepreneur of the Year awards, Top Woman in Media awards, Marketing Executive of the Year. So, I mean, it's been great to have you on the podcast. I'd like to help two groups of people to give advice to from great leaders like yourself. One is recent college graduates when they're looking to pursue their first professional job and career and start their career. What advice would you have for them?
I would say do as many paid internships as you can do while you're in school, because the competition is fierce. And the applications that we receive, a lot of these college grads have had multiple internships, have a strong portfolio, and have already been freelancing. I think that is incredible. And I would also say that it's okay to not know what you want to do with your career when you take that first job, but try to stick with stuff that you really love. Like, don't take a job just because you think it's going to pay you more money and you're going to hate it, because then you're going to get a bad taste in your mouth for the entire industry and maybe end up changing direction. I've seen that. And so that would be my advice. Jeff, is with those internships and sticking with the stuff you love and knowing what you're good at. And then also being open to new opportunities. And if somebody says, hey, do you want to learn SEO? Do you want to learn Facebook ads? I would almost always say yes, unless there is a really good reason why, it would be a disservice to that person. But I always try to say yes to things that made sense, that were out of my comfort zone. And we have to keep learning all the time. And so if they can keep that mindset of, I'm going to learn, and it's okay to fail, and I'm going to keep an open mind and be able to receive constructive criticism so I can grow and evolve. Those are so, like, at that early stage, that's so critical, because you want to get better and you want to keep getting better. And if you can't take the constructive criticism, you're going to just stay in the same place. So all of those things combined is probably, what I would come back to. And in the years that we've worked with many recent college grads that have kind of come out very green.
Yeah, no, great advice. The second group is you were in your career a couple of years, whatever the time frame is, but now you have people that work for you. So you're, a manager or you're a leader for the first time in terms of, the HR organizational chart. What advice would you have for them as they start their leadership journey?
That is really, really challenging. We have, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but we have a serious mental health challenge in our country, especially since the pandemic. And I know a lot of companies are struggling with how many or how much involvement in services and resources do they provide to people. I don't know if you know this, but anxiety and depression are at all-time highs in the country. We see the suicide rates climbing. It is so difficult to be a leader and be a boss and just get day-to-day stuff done. And now we're, faced with some of these more recent but more prevalent challenges of, that is an awkward position to be, because somebody could be just struggling in their job, not because they're bad at their job, but because they're having other personal challenges. And you can't always overstep those boundaries. It's not appropriate. And we're really kind of between a rock and a hard place right now. And so the only, advice I would say is you have to stay very grounded as a leader and stay very committed to your professional values and what you think is in the best interest of the whole group, which sometimes those are very tough decisions to make. And right now, with all of this that's kind of snowballing, it's not always easy to mentor people because some of the mentorship that they need is more on a personal level. And I've mentored lots of aspiring entrepreneurs, and almost always in all of those conversations, it comes back to life issues and challenges, and our lives are very complex and our time is very limited. And so I think, again, you have to really trust yourself, know yourself well, because if you're not comfortable with who you are and you're not healthy, you are not going to be able to help or nurture or mentor any of the people that work, below you, or that are, I should say, reporting to you or trying to learn from you. But as just a, day-to-day leader, Jeff, I do not think the definition of a leader is that anywhere near the same as what it was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, and what the expectations are that we're putting on our leaders, some of them, I think impossible expectations. But yeah, that's a tough role to be in. But again, you got to stick with the style and trust your intuition and do your best. And that's all you can do. And the ones that succeed, maybe it's a few and far between, but really double down and invest in those people and encourage them. And the ones that are maybe struggling, do your best to encourage them and stay positive. But sometimes some things are a little out of our control. And I don't think corporate America is going to be able to solve all these new challenges that we're facing today. I think that's the reality, unless we get some different types of resources and programs in place there. So that's my 2 cents on that. It's very, very difficult topic right now.
Yeah, no, great advice. Val, congratulations again on 20 years as a company. You've had a fascinating career. I can see this conversation having a part two down the road. But thanks for being on the corporate couch.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks for having me. And it's a pleasure reconnecting with you. And congrats on all your success as well.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day. Well, it's great talking to Val. I just think she's incredible. I mean, really a social media pioneer. And at 24 in the early 2000s, to start a business as a female. I mean, it's obviously a lot more common today, but I mean,
It's amazing.
2 years out of college,
Yeah.
it just incredible. And what I loved about her too, and that's why I asked her if she was a good student, and she said, of course, and that was obviously my guess. But most really good students, they don't like to fail in things. So if you're really good at math or history or science or all of them, you don't want to try anything new for fear of failure. So it's that failure mindset that Carol Dweck in her book Growth Mindset talked about, and she has a tremendous growth mindset. Val does, and she doesn't fear failure.
Yeah. And
What did you take out of it, Joe?
the thing that I liked about her, of course, she's been in all sorts of different industries. It's interesting to see her talk about what her business started out as, and then they moved into this, and they moved into this, and moved into this. And she said once they started in social media, she said that the abundance of data that was available then was almost like an early Christmas. And it sparked this new energy and this new enthusiasm that she had for marketing in general, because literally every time that anybody clicks on anything now, a transaction is created and it can be studied and it can be quantified, and it satisfied something in her life. It kind of reminded me of the story from 1987, if you remember this, when Robert Bork was nominated to the Supreme Court, and somebody leaked from a local video store, leaked all of the movies that he had rented from that local video store in an attempt to embarrass him. And I remember when that happened, that there was some discussion that, well, wait a minute, can anybody just go to any, mom and pop video store and find a list of movies that could be embarrassing to anybody they want to embarrass in public? And they interviewed a store owner, and he said no, because we can't keep that kind of history for anybody. We're running our whole business off of an IBM with only 32 meg of disk drive in it, right? He said, we don't have a place to store all that history of everything that everybody has ever rented. And even if we did, what would we do with it? I remember that's what he said. This is in 1987. What would we do with that kind of knowledge? Well, of course, we've learned since then what can be done with it. Amazon has learned with what can be done with that. YouTube has learned what can be done with that. Netflix has learned what can be done with that, to the point that literally everything that you do, if it can be quantified, has a business purpose and some reason to exist. And there will always be somebody like Valerie out there ready to consume that and send it back to the client and say, look, we studied your transactions, and this is what we have discovered. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And for our younger listeners, what we're talking about in 1987 is you actually went to a store and got a VHS tape and put it in a VHS recorder or machine to play it back. So just so you can Wikipedia that video VHS.
I miss VHS. I kind of wish it was still around.
Well, based on that, Joe, what kind of leadership wisdom would you like to impart on our listeners?
Well, now I've got a quote from the great philosopher and comic book store owner. His name is Stuart Bloom. One time when he was referring to an Iron Man helmet that was signed by Robert Downey Jr., and he said, okay, if you're going to question the importance of an actor's signature on a plastic helmet from a movie based on a comic book, then all of our lives have no meaning.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.